Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into A Breath of Fresh Sports. I am your host, John Piszczek, and as always, I'm excited to be here today. We have a couple of great topics today, and we hope to have a great show. And, personally speaking, one of my favorite aspects of sports is the fact that everyone can have an opinion, and regardless if you agree with that opinion or not, you can still have it, and it makes for a lot of really great arguments in the sports world, regardless of what the topic is. And personally speaking, one of my favorite arguments to have is talking about all-time NBA point guards, because when it comes to point guards, so many of them are similar in so many ways. It's just one or two minor things that kind of put one above the other, and that's what makes it, and that's the beauty of it all. When you're arguing point guards with people, the top names you'll usually see, Magic Johnson is typically the consensus number one all-time point guard. Steve Nash, Isaiah Thomas, some people will say Oscar Robertson, Jason Kidd, even Steph Curry, if you're into that, the whole three-point thing. But a name that I see a lot of people kind of discredit on this list is former Utah Jazz point guard John Stockton. And the point guard position is really predicated and based on dishing out the basketball, running the offense, and getting your teammates involved. And with that said, John Stockton is the all-time leader in both assists and steals, which are two of the number one things that make a point guard a point guard. And it's not just that John Stockton is the all-time leader in assists. He has it by a record margin. In terms of NBA records, John Stockton is probably the Wayne Gretzky of these records. Simply speaking of the fact, it's going to be a really long time before anyone even comes close to touching his all-time records. Now, how can someone with so many assists be so discredited and often not even be in people's top 5 in terms of true point guards in NBA history? As a matter of fact, lately, on social media platforms and even YouTube, I've seen a lot of videos and posts that refer to John Stockton as the most overrated player in NBA history. And the reason they say this is because they like to attribute most of Stockton's assists to the fact that he played with another all-time great, being former Jazz forward Karl Malone. And a lot of people say that without Malone, Stockton was nothing. And the reason they put guys like Magic Johnson and Isaiah Thomas over John Stockton is, the one argument you'll always see is, well, Stockton played with Malone. And the reason this kind of breaks the argument is the fact that Karl Malone is the second all-time leading scorer in NBA history. Only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has scored more points than him. And it just baffles me that people can think someone's success relies so heavily on another player. One of the things I don't like about sports as a whole is the fact that we as fans like to try our best to discredit greatness. And this doesn't just go for the NBA, this really goes for sports as a whole. If you talk to any non-Patriots fan, they'll tell you, oh, Tom Brady, he was only productive because of Bill Belichick. Well, if it was Bill Belichick's system, then how come that exact same system went 5-11 in 2000 with Drew Bledsoe at quarterback? It's just we often try to make excuses for why greatness is greatness. Another example is that group of NBA fans who like to say that his legacy would have been ruined if not for Ray Allen's corner 3 in Game 6 of the 2013 Finals against the Spurs. Well, what people like to ignore is the fact that LeBron James had scored 16 fourth-quarter points leading up to that shot. Without LeBron, they're not even in the game. But we like to say LeBron's legacy would have been tarnished if not for Ray Allen. And it's really the only thing about sports I find annoying. And then, obviously, we circle back to John Stockton. We like to make it seem like he's only a great point guard because he had the benefit of playing with Karl Malone. So if you're one of those people, the question I'd ask you is, if you replace John Stockton with any other point guard in NBA history, do you get the same results? And by that, I mean, if you replace John Stockton with Eric Snow on those Jazz teams, is Eric Snow the all-time leader in assists? he simply wouldn't be. He wouldn't even sniff John Stockton's assist totals. And let's just take Karl Malone out of the picture as a whole. John Stockton, without Karl Malone, would still be the NBA's all-time leader in steals. And, take assists out of the picture. John Stockton, at his peak, was a 17-point-per-game scorer on extremely efficient numbers, especially for the era he played in. In an era where three-point shooting was looked over, and really the only guys shooting threes were bench players and maybe like Michael Jordan, John Stockton was a 40% three-point shooter and finished his career as a 38% three-point shooter, despite playing it in a very physical era where threes were not really considered a viable option for winning. Like I said, you take Malone out of the equation. He was still an Iron Man in terms of games played. In 19 total seasons played, Stockton played all 82 games 16 times. I call that pretty impressive. And then, without Malone, John Stockton is still an extremely efficient shooter and scorer who actually had a really good clutch gene that people like to overlook. And my examples for this is the 1997 Western Conference Finals. The Jazz are matched up against the Houston Rockets, who just 2 seasons ago won back-to-back championships and were a great team in the Western Conference. Game 6, series on the line, John Stockton catches an inbound pass and drills a dagger 3 to send the Jazz to the finals. And then we fast forward to the 1998 season. Jazz are in the finals. It's Game 6 against the Bulls. And a lot of people remember the shot that Michael Jordan hit over Byron Russell. It was his last shot as a Bull. It ultimately won Chicago their 6th championship. So obviously we have reasons to call that one of the most famous, if not the most famous shot of all time. But people forget what happened just seconds before that shot. And what happened was Karl Malone catches the ball in the post. John Stockton cuts to the right wing. Malone hits him across the court, and John Stockton drills what could have and likely should have been the game-winning 3 to force Game 7. So in just a 2-year span, I can think of 2 instances where John Stockton hit an extremely clutch shot to either get his team to a championship or extremely heighten his team's chances of winning a championship, which, in my opinion, obviously, I believe Michael Jordan pushed off on Byron Russell. Jazz should have won Game 6. I'm not saying that Utah wins Game 7, but I'm saying there should have been a Game 7. John Stockton's prime was some of the most pure dominance we've ever seen. In the 1989 to 90 season, he averaged 17 points, 15 assists, 3 steals on 50% shooting and 40% from 3. Those numbers are unheard of. And if we really can attribute all of John Stockton's success to the mere fact he played with Karl Malone, then how come the other point guards who played with all-time great players, or even, to get more specific, all-time great big men, how come their assist numbers never even sniffed John Stockton's? Penny Hardaway, who played with the Orlando Magic and Shaquille O'Neal for a few seasons, at his absolute peak, Hardaway averaged just 7 assists, playing with Shaquille O'Neal, who is often referred to as the most dominant big man of all time. Those 7 assists are less than half of what John Stockton averaged during his best season, and that was playing with Shaquille O'Neal. You look at the Miami Heat Big Three. Why is it that at his absolute peak, Mario Chalmers only averaged 5 assists? And that was playing with Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, guys like Ray Allen, LeBron James, Mike Miller. How come his best was only 5 assists per game? It's just, what Stockton did was simply incredible. He is no doubt, in my opinion, the second best point guard of all time, behind only Magic Johnson. The reason I put Magic in front of him is because I think they're pretty close in terms of accolades, But unfortunately for Stockton, Magic has the rings that Stockton doesn't. And that's really what sets them aside in terms of greatness, in my opinion. But it just bothers me going through social media and even YouTube videos. I feel like every time I log on to this site, there's just something along the lines of, oh, why John Stockton is the most overrated player ever, by some YouTube commentary channel who just like to discredit everything John Stockton ever did in his career. I'm not even exaggerating when I say, I'm filming this on a Wednesday. Tuesday night, when I was looking up details for this show, I saw 2 videos in my recommended saying why John Stockton is extremely overrated. I obviously didn't click on them because obviously I'm not going to give that person a view. And they always have the same things where it's, oh, he played with Karl Malone. Guess what? Plenty of people played with Shaquille O'Neal. Plenty of people played with Kevin Garnett. People played with Dirk Nowitzki. People played with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And out of all of those players I just named, all of which are all-time great bigs, the only one who ever even came close to Stockton's numbers was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's point guard. And that's just because it was Magic Johnson, who was literally the only point guard who was ever better than Magic Johnson. Now, if you're one of those people who likes to watch those videos, claiming Stockton's overrated, and if you get easily convinced, then I highly recommend you do some of your own research, and you'll see that he was an extremely efficient scorer. He was an Iron Man who was always on the court. You could always depend on him. He was clutch when it mattered most. People really overlook him in terms of all-time great clutch players. And my closing statement, really, if you take John Stockton off the Utah Jazz, and he and Karl Malone never played together, I highly doubt that Karl Malone would be second all-time in points scored in NBA history. Now you flip it, take Karl Malone off the Utah Jazz, and he and Stockton never play together, John Stockton would still be the all-time leader in assists. You just separate the two from each other. They were obviously an all-time great duo. Without Malone, Stockton is still an extremely tenacious steals leader and overall defender. Take Stockton away from Malone, maybe Malone isn't the same prolific scorer we know him as today. It's just a shame that so many people would discredit him simply because of who he played around. And overall, I'm just not a fan of trying to discredit greatness and make excuses for it. Now, in the NFL, it seems like almost every year there's that one team, rather division, that going into the playoffs, we know that division really isn't a threat. And for years, we looked at the AFC South, where it was essentially Andrew Luck, just dominating everyone. I mean, I don't think the Tennessee Titans ever beat Andrew Luck. The Houston Texans never had a quarterback. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars were just awful for 10 plus years. And when Andrew Luck hurt his shoulder, it became essentially mediocre teams just trying to battle it out, trying to see who could get 9 wins to win the division. And for years, that was the AFC South. I think we've since moved on from that. I think all the teams have gotten pretty good. And the AFC South is no longer the laughingstock in terms of playoff races in the NFL. I look at this past season. The NFC East was terrible. The Philadelphia Eagles were 5-7. 5-7. That's 2 games under 500 with 4 games left to play. And they somehow made the playoffs. And they didn't make the playoffs as a wild card. They outright won the division with single-digit wins. It's just a shame that there always needs to be this division that really doesn't even deserve to be in the playoffs, but they somehow get in because of the NFL's playoff format. And I think we've seen the script sort of flip in the NFL. If I had to pick which division that's going to be this year, and maybe even for years to come, I would say it's going to be the AFC East, which sounds crazy because you look at the AFC East and you say, whoa, the Patriots, they've been dominant for 20 years. How can you call their division the new laughingstock of the NFL? Well, it's simple. The Patriots are getting old. The Patriots are getting really old. And then you look at the young players they did have, they've slowly but surely lost player after player in free agency. My two favorite examples, obviously, following the Super Bowl against Philadelphia, the team decided to move on from Malcolm Butler. That was their best corner at the time. He's gone. This past summer in free agency, Kyle Van Noy, who was their best linebacker, arguably, maybe he or Jamie Collins, depends on who you're talking to. Kyle Van Noy not only left the team, but he left the team to go to a division rival, Miami Dolphins. And the reason I think that this division is not going to be that good is because you just look down the list. There is literally no experience in this division. And when the playoffs roll around, experience is everything. The team that's been there, done that, has a huge advantage over a young team who's finally making their first playoff appearance. Now, obviously, we know Bill Belichick. He's been to so many Super Bowls. He's made so many playoff appearances, winning season after winning season. How can you say the division has no experience? Well, you take a look at everything but Bill Belichick. Adam Gase, 1 playoff appearance, 0-1 in the playoffs. Sean McDermott, 2 playoff appearances, 0-2 in the playoffs. And Brian Flores has been a head coach for just 1 season in which his team finished 5-11. So outside of Bill Belichick, you look down the other 3 head coaches, and they've combined for just 3 playoff appearances without a single playoff win. And it doesn't stop at coaching. You look at the quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, still on his rookie contract, has yet to make a playoff appearance. Josh Allen, still on his rookie contract, 1 playoff appearance, 0-1. And then we even look at the Patriots. Jarrett Stidham has never started an NFL game and has attempted just 4 NFL passes. And we expect him to enter this season as the Patriots starting quarterback. And then to make things even worse, at least Stidham had a season in the same locker room with Tom Brady, and he got to maybe learn a little bit from Tom. The Miami Dolphins have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who at, I want to say, 36 or 38 years old, somehow has never been to the playoffs. And then their other option is Josh Rosen, who, once again, on his rookie contract, never been to the playoffs, never even started a full season. And then they spent their top draft pick this past draft on Tua Tagovailoa, who's a rookie. So you look down the list of quarterbacks in this division, you have 0-1 in the playoffs, never made the playoffs, never even started a game, and never even started a game, with their other option having never even seen the playoffs in 15 plus years. So how can a division have so little experience, even though the NFC East hasn't been particularly good for a really long time? They at least had Eli Manning, who's been to and won 2 Super Bowls. The AFC South at least had Andrew Luck, who had made playoff appearance after playoff appearance. You look at that for the AFC East. Who's that guy? They have Bill Belichick, but for the first time in 20 years, he's without Tom Brady. And the last time he didn't have Tom Brady, which was the 2008 season, the team missed the playoffs. Albeit they did have a good season. They finished 11-5 with Matt Castle. They still could not squeak in. And the reason, obviously, Buffalo's coming off a great season. They won double-digit games. They had a magnificent defense. So people might ask me, why do I think, we should just scoff at Buffalo? And the reason for that is I think Buffalo has really hit their ceiling as a team with Josh Allen. It's the same reason I'm critical of Lamar Jackson. It's just that you need a quarterback who can throw the ball down the field in order to win in this league. You look at the Baltimore Ravens. They went 14-2. They creamed almost all of their opponents. When the playoffs rolled around, they got one and done by a 9-7 Titans team that barely made the playoffs. So what is the ceiling for these teams that have mobile quarterbacks who maybe don't have the most accurate arms? Josh Allen, despite the fact his team made the playoffs, he barely eclipsed 3,000 passing yards, and in his 2 NFL seasons has yet to complete over 60% of his throws. Is that the quarterback production that you're supposed to ride to a championship? No, it's just not going to work like that. I look at Miami. I love what they're doing in Miami. Chris Greer and Brian Flores are extraordinary at their jobs. Greer has done a great job with free agents and draft picks, whereas Flores has really got his locker room to buy into him and his defensive mindset. However, with that said, I do think it's a year too early. They added a lot of pieces at once. A lot of those pieces were young, and I just don't think they can integrate so many new additions in so little time. Kyle Van Noy, Byron Jones, Jordan Howard, and a handful of high draft picks. I just don't see how they can make all these pieces work at once. I think Miami is going to be a future powerhouse, but I think we're just a year too late. The Jets. If you want the truth, I like the Jets more than I like any other team in this division, which is weird because, well, the Jets haven't really been relevant since somehow Mark Sanchez got to an AFC championship game. But the Jets, although they weren't huge additions, they did manage to make additions at the positions that matter the most. Their offensive line was struggling. Their young quarterback Sam Darnold was getting lit up on almost every play. They used their top pick on Mekhi Becton, who we at least hope will turn out to be an elite offensive lineman. But hey, they added a new lineman to protect Sam Darnold. In the second round, they were able to acquire a receiver, Mims, who we don't know what he is, obviously, because like Becton, he's a rookie. But the point is, they used their first and second draft pick to address a position of need. More importantly, they used it to address a position on the offensive line. And people, although the Jets are coming off a 7-9 season, I think the Jets were a pretty good 7-9 team. The reason I say that is because at the beginning of the year, something really weird and unheard of happened. They lost their starting quarterback, Sam Darnold, to mono. That's something you don't see that every day. Their backup quarterback, Trevor Siemian, broke his leg in just his first start. So at the beginning of the season, the Jets were starting Luke Falk, who had never even played in an NFL game, and he was now their starting quarterback. Predictably, the Jets didn't win a game with Luke Falk. He was subsequently cut at one point during the season. And by the time Sam Darnold got on the field, the damage was done, and the Jets were really in a hole too deep to dig themselves out of, regardless of how good Darnold could have played. With that said, Sam Darnold and the Jets went 5-2 over their last 7 games. Which I understand, 7-9 isn't great, but when everything was together, when Sam Darnold was on the field and had his opportunity to get his feet wet with the offense, they went 5-2, 3 games over 500, and the Jets played their best football of 2019 when Sam Darnold was on the field in the latter half of the season. I think, honestly, that 7-game stretch is probably the most respectable thing we have out of any team in this division. And if I needed to make a prediction, I would say either the Jets or the Bills are going to limp into the playoffs with maybe 9 wins. I don't see any team running away with the division. I think the Jets or the Bills will sort of back their way into the postseason with a 9-win season. Another thing that should be noted is that the Jets dealt with a lot of injuries last year. They lost Sam Darnold. Le'Veon Bell missed a handful of games. And the biggest one was they added C.J. Mosley in free agency to be their new cornerstone franchise linebacker. And Mosley missed a good chunk of the season. So that's all worth being noted. Hopefully they will remain at full strength this year, and we can see exactly what they do when they're together. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm John Piszczek, and you can find this show on YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, and even check out our Instagram at A Breath of Fresh Sports. Really, any support helps, and thank you to those who actually do watch. It means a lot to me. I am more than happy to entertain just one person if I can. All the links to the other sites will be in the description below. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a nice day.